Yes, loads to go tonight, including this bizarre Feminists for Palestine movement, who I think need a few home truths. But right now, it's time for our head-to-head. Well, Joe Biden delivered a State of the Union speech last night, and amongst taking aim at Donald Trump and ad-libbing most of a feisty immigration exchange, the president told Americans that he wants no one jailed for using or possessing marijuana.
My cabinet to review the federal classification of marijuana and expunging thousands of convictions for the mere possession, because no one should be jailed for simply using or have it on their record.
I got about half of that, I'll be honest. But anyway, so something about marijuana. So, Biden is encouraging a more positive outlook on cannabis. It's worth remembering that in 2022, Biden pardoned thousands of convicted marijuana possession, and in 24 US states, the drug is legal for recreational use. He's called upon regulators to review whether cannabis should be reclassified, with the US Health Department last year recommending its removal from America's most restrictive category list. Well, look, I thought, how is this going to affect us over here? Everywhere you walk now, there seems to be the stench of cannabis. But according to a Pew Research Center survey from April 2023, so 59% of Americans say marijuana should be legal, and apparently 18.7% of Americans use the drug. According to the Office for National Statistics here, an estimated 7.6% of people aged between 16 and 59 in the UK, so 2.5 million of us reported using cannabis last year. That's a lie, obviously. I mean, obviously, that's complete rubbish. Anyway, right. It's legal in more than 40 countries, and the cannabis industry is projected to reach a revenue of $60.79 billion. So look, where are you on this? Should we be legalising cannabis over here? I'm joined now by consultant neurologist and medical cannabis expert, Professor Mark Barnes, and retired prison governor and author, Vanessa Frake. Both of you, thank you very much. Vanessa, should we legalise cannabis over here, do you think?
No, I don't think so. You know, you could look at it that it's pretty well legal as is. You know, if you caught in possession with cannabis, I think the fine's something like £90, if that. You may get just a warning. You know, and for dealing it, the prison sentence is something between 6 months and 7 years maximum. You know, I don't think that. I think we've got much more to worry ourselves about than whether we should or should not legalise cannabis. I also think that, you know, I've seen prisoners coming into jail who have long-term side effects from long-term use of cannabis, ranging from, you know, psychosis, depression, anxiety, and in some cases even the onset of schizophrenia. So, you know, I don't actually agree with the whole let's legalise it and say, you know, away you go. It's all very well if it's done in a controlled manner. You know, it's in a sterile area. You know, people use it as medicinal. I accept that, but there are very vulnerable people in our society who get addicted very quickly and go from cannabis to harder drugs.
Well, you've covered a lot there, and I will come back to you. I'll bring in Professor Mark Barnes now, consultant neurologist and medical cannabis expert. So, all right, massively paraphrasing here, but it's a gateway drug that can have massive health consequences.
The quick answer to that is no, it's not a gateway drug. Of course, it can have health consequences. No drug, no medicine is entirely safe. You're quite right. It can cause psychosis in vulnerable people, particularly with high THC use. So it's not entirely safe. Nothing is entirely safe. Alcohol is not entirely safe. Tobacco is not entirely safe. Driving a car is not entirely safe. So I would eventually agree that it should be legalized. But I say eventually, and I mean that because in 2018, we legalized cannabis for medical purposes, which I think was a great step forward. But since then, 5 years ago, we've only got 36,000 people on legal prescribed medical cannabis. Now, you may say that sounds a big number, but when you compare to what estimated to be 1.8 million people who use cannabis daily for medical purposes, really that legalization of the medical scene hasn't gone well at all. So what I want to see is the medical scene got right first. So people who need it for chronic conditions can get it for their chronic conditions without the need to go in the private sector and without the need to continue to get it from the black market.
OK, and I mean, Vanessa, you're seeing all of the negatives when you were in prison. Do you want to just talk to us a little bit about some of the things that you saw that were cannabis related? I saw you shaking your head there when Mark said that it wasn't a gateway drug.
Well, I think it is a gateway drug. Certainly, when you have vulnerable people using it that only get a high for so long, and then look for something, more and more and more. And we've had people come into prison who are clean, who go out either on cannabis or worse. And I think it's very naive to think that it's not a gateway and people don't go on to use it. I have no problem with it being used in medical circumstances at all. I know, like many illicit drugs, there are some benefits to it. That is not my issue. My issue is by saying to everybody, particularly the vulnerable in our society, that crack on and use it as and when.
Yeah, look, Mark, I mean, you only have to go outside this office on my walk home and you just smell it everywhere. I mean, cities stink of cannabis from end to end at the moment, right? So, I mean, I suppose an argument would be, if everybody who wants to do it is already doing it, why pay criminals to make it and bring it to you when essentially, I suppose, the state could do that and we could tax it?
Well, that is a reasonable argument. It's estimated that the cannabis industry would create about 100,000 jobs if you extrapolate from the States. It would raise several billion pounds worth of tax income. But more importantly, other than those economic arguments, is that you can provide to people who want to use cannabis, perfectly reasonably, safe, regulated product. At the moment, you can get adulterated product. It's quite a problem at the moment. Going to the criminal and the black market, getting adulterated product with all sorts of health consequences to that. So you can provide a cleaner, safer, regulated market that's a benefit to the economy. So I can't see an issue with that.
Mark, I'm just going to stick with you on this now. So I can remember reading headlines when I was younger, I think mainly because my parents used to show them to me every now and again, which would say, that kind of headline in the Daily Mail, which was my little Timmy had one puff of a cannabis cigarette and now he's got paranoid schizophrenia. Yeah, can it be that bad? Can it have that much of an impact on people?
Basically, that is, it can in some people. If you're vulnerable already, if you had a psychotic episode already, you've got a close family relative who's had psychosis or schizophrenia, then taking high THC, particularly cannabis, can trigger that. That is definitely there, but the risk of that is really very low. There was a very interesting study by a doctor called Hickman in 2008, I think it was, that showed you had to stop 10,000 young men and 29,000 young women from smoking cannabis to prevent one episode of psychosis. So, yes, it's a risk. Yes, people with psychosis shouldn't take it, but is it a big risk? Right. No, it's not.
Yeah, and just a final word from you on this, Vanessa. In your experience as a prison governor, look, you must have seen people who'd got themselves sucked into the criminal. When we talk about gateway drug, it's not actually just for the drug users, I think. I think a lot of people maybe start out dealing cannabis and then they go into the harder stuff. Then they find themselves with longer prison sentences, etc. You must have seen that criminal underworld there. It's a nasty business.
Yeah, absolutely. It always starts small. It starts, with the occasional joint from your mate, and then of course you want another one, and then you've got no money to buy any, and then you go out nicking things, and then you get caught, and then you end up in prison, and then cannabis in a jail is worth 3-4 times what it's worth on the street. So this whole sort of episode just seems to snowball, and I'm thinking, well, why are we going to make this easier?
Yeah, look, both of you, thank you very much. Really good stuff, that. I enjoyed it. I was consultant neurologist and medical cannabis expert Professor Mark Bars and retired prison governor and author Vanessa Frake. I think we very much did get both sides of it there, didn't we? Who do you agree with? Should marijuana laws be relaxed or even scrapped here, do you think, in the UK? Dalton says, I used to think yes, but I'm worried it would be a real gateway drug. I think more research should be done into the effects of the brain of young people who use it before we consider legalising it. Lou says, personally, I'm sick of the smell of drugs on the street. It needs more enforcement. There is that side of it, isn't there? Ollie says, this isn't a yes or no question. I am all for as much freedom as possible, but imagine if somebody turns up to work stoned and causes an incident that hurts or worse kills somebody. Who pays your compensation? Yeah, a series of good points, this. Right, well, I can safely say this is the closest poll we have ever done here on Patrick Christie's Tonight. 47% of you think that marijuana laws should be relaxed or scrapped. 53% of you say it shouldn't. We're in EU referendum territory here, people. So anyway, thank you for taking part in that.